Welcome everybody to our third digital book club. This is the only book club where you don't have to read the book or wear pants. I hope. I don't know that for a fact, but as far as I know, it's the only one where you don't have to. I'm Michelle Krasny. I'm a career engagement coach, and I'm all about helping people love their jobs. And I started this book club to talk with some really interesting and inspiring people about what they love about their jobs, how they got where they are, how maybe there's still some struggle in that, and any sort of wisdom or advice or inspiration that they want to share with anybody else in the world who might be in a similar position. So Lindy is our guest today, Lindy Wilkins. Hello. She is awesome. I met her when I was doing a fellowship in Toronto, and I took my very first ever maker class from her. And she introduced me to laser cutting. Yeah, I don't know, the terms, not so up on. But she introduced me to laser cutting and Arduino and 3D printing, which it turns out was not as cool as laser cutting. She let me use her baby, her laser printer, or laser cutter. And currently she teaches at OCAD and Ryerson. She's on like a million projects. She's artist in residence at Social Body Lab, co-executive director at Little Dada, co-organizer at Make Change Conference and Make Friends Meetup, and director at Site 3 coLaboratory, all while co-running an installation company called Big Red Sky. So that's a lot. You're a busy lady. Mm-hmm. Do you want to kick us off by giving us like the 10,000 foot view of like what you do and how you got there?
Yeah. So basically, I always, like, as you mentioned, have many kind of gigs on the go. I would say like my sort of tagline is like community builder and like creative technologist would be the sort of two things I do. So I have an undergraduate in sort of this program called Computation Arts from Concordia University, and basically it was just about like the place in the world where robots and websites kind of meet. And at that, it like at the time I did it, it was like a fairly new program. It was just sort of like exploring how like, how electronics and art, what they look like together. So I did that. And then after that, I worked as a web developer for a little while. So I sort of took the alternative route of, instead of going to school to become a web developer, I was a web developer to pay for my art school. And then after that, I did my master's at OCAD and started to do a bunch of like community involved work. So I started leading different makerspace initiatives, and basically like the way I sort of describe it is like using technology and making things as like a mechanism for community building. So it's not always about the actual like, like how to use a laser cutter, which I love laser cutters, but it's not necessarily about the laser cutter. It's usually about like how to build community and using that as a tool. And through that, I sort of started teaching. So I teach, various things, and I sort of also run a bunch of labs at universities. So, that's like all sort of like a combination of things I do to sort of support a bunch of not-for-profit work I do. So grassroots community building with technology. I know that's a little confusing. It's sort of like a windy path, and everything's kind of interconnected. I see my professional sort of life and my personal life like really closely intertwined, and I'm not really sure where one begins and the other ends.
Perfect. So you kind of answered my next question, which is what was the thread that connected it all for you? And it sounds like that was community building.
Yeah, I think it's community building, and I would say like access to tools. And I think I'll touch a bit on this in a bit as well, but how can we, like the people who are curious and the people who want to make things, how can we not only let them do that, but also teach them what they need to know without, like, not everyone needs to have an engineering degree, and that's okay. So sort of like exploring that, so a lot of the teaching I do is technical work in an art institution. So I teach artists how to program, I teach them how to use heavy machinery, that kind of stuff.
Important work.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite part of your day?
So lately I've been working in a lot of research labs. And I think my favorite part is when someone who's really like knowledgeable and passionate about something, you know, comes in and they want to see it real, and they, you know, maybe they've done a lot of research. This happens a lot in my day to day. People have done a lot of research on this concept and they don't know how to make it real. And you know, if by the end of the day I can either come up with a plan or give them a prototype or like tell them even how to make it real, that is like a really great part of my day. Because, you know, sometimes, a lot of the time people think it's something that can only exist in their head, right? That they can't, it's not something they can hold. And with a lot of the tools that I use, I can give them something that they can hold, and I can show them how they can make and iterate on that probably in an afternoon. So that's a huge amount of fun, because it's very rewarding to see people understand that their work can be tangible.
Yeah, I think I had exactly that experience when I took the class from you. I was doing a bunch of vermicomposting work and I thought it was fun. And then you were like, hey, we can do all these things. And I left with a prototype. I don't know if it was the same day, but it was pretty close.
Yeah, and I think that happens a lot with especially like sort of the community-based work I do. You know, people will come in and they're like, I'm really like interested in, let's say, like woodworking. And I'm like, well, that's cool. You know, maybe they've never done it before. Maybe they don't know how to get into it, you know, but like I can go down and show them right away. Like, it's okay to have no idea how to use a table saw, but we can do it right now and you can learn, right? So yeah, it's really empowering to show people that they can do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm curious, do you ever have like moments of doubt? It sounds like this has been a pretty purposeful, though winding path for you. Do you ever have moments when you're like, you know, what the hell am I doing with my life?
Oh yeah, all the time. There are hugely like contradictory things. I'm, you know, pretty environmentally conscious, but it's very difficult in the work that I'm doing, because sometimes I refer to working in a makerspace as working in a garbage factory. And that's just what it feels like sometimes, you know, like on one hand, people are gaining this knowledge. On the other hand, they're kind of just making trash. You know, there's that environmental aspect. There's also like a lot of aspects of like how to build inclusivity. And I feel like there are so many different parts of that. You know, there's like class, there's, you know, gender, there's race, there's ability, there's so many of these different things. And like, sometimes it's really hard to know whether I am doing the right thing or whether I'm sort of contributing to the problem in a way that I haven't thought about. So there's a lot of like, you know, sometimes I'm just like, you know, maybe I should just be a web developer, because that's a career that is established and the pitfalls are widely documented.
It's reasonably light on the garbage production too.
Yeah.
I mean, the physical garbage production.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that when you're kind of wrestling with these concerns?
Yeah, it's really tough, and I feel like I definitely have ups and downs about it. And like I frequently do like really think about, you know, I try to set aside time that I can actively think about what I'm doing, and like try and set aside time where I reflect on all the gigs I have going, and I'm like, which one of these is achieving my goal and which one of these could be reevaluated. And like I find if I don't take time to think about it, then I just go from one thing to the next, and I find myself like a year down the road, I'm like, what have I been doing? So like actively setting time out to do that, and then having like people around me who I talk about this with, and I don't let it sit in my head. And I'm like, you know, like, what do you think about, you know, the amount of trash this class produces or something, for example, or, you know, like, what do you think about this inclusivity initiative? Like, do you think it's effective? And like, I like really go out of my way to make those assessments about the things, like directly confront the things that bother me. Because I just don't want to look back, and like something I always think about is like, when I think about, you know, myself in 10 years or 20 years, like, what do I want to say I have done, and how do I want to say it unfolded? And I want to be able later to speak confidently about the choices I made. So a lot of active reflection for sure.
So I'm curious because I know so many people, especially people with multiple gigs, struggle with finding that time to reflect. And it's so crucial, like you said, to really being purposeful in your life and where you're heading. How do you do that? How do you carve that time out?
Yeah. So I'm really lucky to have my co-executive director of my not-for-profit Little Dada, who is Hillary Predko, and she is similar to me. We have similar fears and anxieties about our careers. So we try to every year kind of sit down and make like a road plan. Some of this is like really helpful in terms of like we do a lot of like applying for grants. So when we sit down every year and decide what grants we're going to apply for, it's a really great opportunity to reflect on what we did last year and like whether or not that was effective. So I try to, as much as I can, sort of back myself into corners where I have no choice but to consider what I'm doing. Because you're right, yeah, it's so hard to carve out that time. And if I just like put a note in my calendar, like, and then reflect for an hour, it probably won't happen. But if it's like, you know, like we need to consider how this is going to fit into our year of programming, or I'm going to consider, you know, how this is going to fit into my future gigs, like that's sort of a good way to back yourself into a corner so you have no choice but to actually consider what you're doing.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of accountability, especially for, I don't know, a quarter of the population that is really dependent on other people to make us be accountable. I'm definitely in that part. Having a partner in crime is pretty amazing. And then having a sort of a natural mark at the year point is great too. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So having read Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Socialist Feminism in the Late 20th Century, and then read the Wikipedia article to explain to me what it was about, I can see sort of the connection with a lot of what's going on in your life. But before we kind of get into that, I'm wondering if you could give us like the TLDR for those who haven't read it yet.
So, yeah, I first kind of came across the Cyborg Manifesto when I was doing my master's degree. It was in a critical theory class, and I just like I was not having any of the critical theory. I felt like it was all like, I don't know if anyone's ever read any like Heidegger or any, you know, Deleuze, and it was just like I felt like it was just these old men kind of waffling around in their brains, and I was like, I don't feel like this speaks to my experience. And I read the Cyborg Manifesto, and I was like, this is the thing. So it's really I would say honestly like an accessible text, difficult to get through. It's very, very difficult to read. And I've probably read it like 20 times, and I feel like I am still processing.
Yay, I'm not
But it's about no. It's super difficult. Like it is a challenging read. And I think that's both good and also notably bad. So, but it's basically about what makes us people, and sort of about this at its core. I think for me the most valuable thing is this concept of sort of fractured identities. So it's that everyone is made up of all of these different pieces that make up you, right? And that can be, you know, like again, like your gender, your ability, your background, your history, your like current situation, like all of these pieces kind of come together to make this cyborg of things. And she kind of Donna Haraway sort of compares it to you know, like this boundary between natural and machine, these boundaries between like physical and non-physical, and fiction and nonfiction. And it's very poetic and awfully and spiraling. But you know, kind of like the idea of there is no thing it is to be a woman, and there is no thing it is to be one thing or another. It's that these things are all pieces. And one thing that really stuck with me is this concept of affinity over identity. So
I asked you about that. I'm so glad that you
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite parts, because it's basically about, you know, like we want to connect on the things that we have an affinity for, but we're so tied down in the way that we identify. And there's no way to move past that. We can't just say like right now, oh, there's no such thing as race, because it's just not true. And we just don't live in a world where that's true right now. So, you know, a lot of the Cyborg Manifesto is calling for the future, I guess. where things are different, but we are not there yet.
It's amazing that this was written in '85.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting too, because if you sort of, so Donna Haraway is still writing, you know, different things. And I think a lot of it kind of holds true, but I do think there's some things she's backpedaled on a little bit since then, which is, she's still evolving, which is pretty neat.
So how does the affinity versus identity concept show up in your community building work?
Yeah, I think at this point in time, I am very conscious of identity, because I feel like, especially in making things and in like, you know, physical fabrication and programming and electronics, like your identity dictates how you're socially situated. But that doesn't necessarily mean that people don't have the same affinities, right? So I sort of see this manifesting in a way of like active invitation to certain things. So I run a women's and LGBTQ open studio night at a makerspace. And one of the things I always do is, instead of, you know, always saying like, of course women are welcome, like I make a night where, yes, specifically this is for women and queer folks to engage in electronics. And I also like actively tag people every week and invite them and make sure that people know that they're like welcome, because I know that we share this affinity, right? So trying to sort of like use this concept of identity, because there's no way we can move past it yet. So yeah, that's sort of how it shows up, like one of the many ways. You know, and I think the difficult thing about it is that like a lot of this is postulating on the future, right? It's not, you know, I think of it sort of like the concept of, you know, like equal pay for women. You can't just say, well, now it's equal, so everything's fine, because the baggage is still there. So like sort of actively working towards this one thing concerning affinity, if that makes sense.
Awesome. So before we open it to general conversation, because I'm sure these awesome people have questions and thoughts and experiences they'd love to share, is there anything about the text that you would like to kind of touch on before we talk more generally?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would like to say is like, it disappoints me that it's so difficult to read, because I love it, but at the same time, I'm like, you know, I wish that these ideas were presented in a more digestible way, and I think that is excluding in its own nature, because of like, of course you had to read the Wikipedia article. I had to read the Wikipedia article, and I still reference the Wikipedia article whenever I have to. This morning to get this stuff straight. So I think it's this great idea, but it's completely indigestible for regular human brains.
Well, I'm very glad that I'm not alone in struggling with the text. So I'd love to, let's see, I'm going to unmute everyone, and I'll remute you if you want. Oh, Claire and Dan are still muted. Oh, yeah, you guys are in control. Anyway, does anybody have anything that they've thought about, that they're interested about, that they'd love to know more about? Jump on in.
Well, I'm looking at the Cyborg Manifesto, and it is difficult to digest.
Yeah.
I mean, even the first sentence is challenging. So the first paragraph, yeah. So yeah. Have you found anything that really makes it more palatable?
There's a couple of really good YouTube videos that kind of dissect the parts of it. Yeah, I really love it for its ideas, and I love it for a few of the quotes that you can kind of pull out of it. But yeah, like as a whole document is difficult. But yeah, there's a couple of good YouTube videos of summarizations of it that I would recommend.
I'll get those links from you at the end and post them in the comments. So
I also saw a student who had interpreted it, but I haven't gotten a chance to look at that. She did a reinterpretation of it.
Oh, cool.
Interesting. So does anybody have any thoughts they want to jump in? Sorry, Charly, were you speaking?
So how has her work influenced your life path?
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of helped me understand the complexity of identity and sort of this idea that like more deeply kind of understanding how complicated people are, I guess, and sort of like the arbitrariness of like boundaries and categories, because I think that's something that a lot of people who feel marginalized by certain groups, like I'm going to use like the technology community as an example, they might feel strange about it because they might feel like they don't identify in these particular categories, and that's how I feel. You know, I'm a bit of a strong personality, so I just kind of push my way through, but that's not necessarily the case for everyone. So I feel like it's really helped me think more about how to work towards you know, people being able to overcome these boundaries.
Interesting. Great, thank you.
So does anybody else want to jump in? Otherwise, I've got like a prompting question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I have a question a little less about the Cyborg Manifesto and more about just generally how you got into this line of work. I know just from a making and fabrication standpoint, as a woman in that field, there's not a lot of me, or not a lot of you, rather. So I'm just curious on how you kind of segued into that.
Yeah, I really got into sort of like, yeah, like I said, programming from like a professional, like I have to make money and I have a computer sort of standpoint. You know, I've always been kind of interested in like code and that kind of stuff. And I really got interested in fabrication when I started hanging out at a makerspace, Site 3 coLaboratory. My good friend Alex Leach invited me, and she was a founder of Site 3. And she was like, you should come by and just like hang out. And I was pretty resistant. I was just like, oh, you know, maybe for like a few minutes as like a personal favor to her. And then I basically just like, basically haven't left in like 5 years. And I think it's because of other sort of like stronger women who spent the time to make sure I felt welcome in the space, and make sure I got like trained on the tools I thought were cool and like made sure that these things happened. Yeah, I feel like that's sort of like what gave me the confidence to put myself in that position.
Awesome. Thank you.
It is so cool that you've really taken that gift and turned around and really, really given it back and are kind of building this community where anybody can see their crazy ideas realized. So there's a lot about boundaries and sort of the blurring thereof in your work, in your life, and in this text. I'm curious, Dan, Claire, Charly, if this comes up for you guys at all in your work.
The blurring of boundaries.
Yeah, so yeah, I really want to like leave it pretty open-ended to see if this comes up at all, but like, so Lindy works at the intersection of about 1 million different things. Does that happen for you guys?
Well, I think it does in my current position. I'm working for a design installation firm in the Seattle area, and it's a small shop, and we have a lot of work with really big brands. So I think it's just kind of a matter of shaping what you want your reality to look like. On any given day, there's like, I'm working on a piece of paper, I'm working in SketchUp, I'm working on a table saw. And it can be challenging to figure out when in the process to move to the next part of the process, because there's no like pencils down moment in a small firm. You kind of just like, it's up to you. And I think as far as like male female boundaries or like the blurring of intersections there, it can be an interesting space. Most of the people, all of the people I work with are men. And especially when I'm in the office, it seems like a lot of the like carpenter types come in and there's like an immediate like, you know, they're of the shop. They're dusty, they're wearing boots, they're like that kind of thing. And I'm in, you know, the office on SketchUp, and that's one reality. And then when I move into the shop, there's like a little bit blurring of like, oh, now I'm the dusty boots one, and they're, you know, working with me one-on-one. So I think it's an interesting space to be in.
Thanks, Claire. It's interesting that you are kind of like at the forefront of a new sort of intersection, and that there are some inherent challenges in that. Thanks for sharing.
The blurring that I have in mind comes on two fronts, really. The blurring between personal and professional. You know, there's things that we may be getting done in a professional environment on a regular basis, and we'd like to do something different for ourselves on our own, kind of separate ourselves, become self-sufficient, and maybe walk away from the employer, so to speak. That's the situation I'm in now. However, the challenge becomes in you're doing it 100% of your day. And doing it during the day for an employer kind of drains you, that I don't want to go home and do the same thing or something extremely similar, even though that's really what I want to do on my own, because I know it's the skill area. You know, it's just I want to do it in a different way and in my own level of control. So that's one perspective. Then the other perspective is that instead of working with physical items, I've worked with Arduinos. I did a technical review on a book integrating web and Arduinos recently, and I like that. I've got a background in electronics, but I don't get the opportunity to do those kinds of things. Yeah. And in our area, I am unaware of a true makerspace where you have access to all the equipment and tools, whereas I did more of that in high school because we had a great shop environment. You know, it's like, of course, nowadays, today's school shops probably have these things. It's like I did it in the days of woodworking and metalworking, which was interesting. But in any case, I integrate at another level, at the software level. Since I work in the web world, web is everywhere. And it's just a matter of integrating various systems. So you're talking to things that you really don't want to work with directly yourself, but you have to do it because you need the data. So there's different kinds of integrations and connections that you can make in your life and your world. We got to juggle them all.
It's okay, Dan. We'll make a road trip somewhere. Maybe we'll go visit Lindy.
Yes.
Charly, how about you? Did anything come up for you?
Oh, well, blurring is definitely what I'm working to do. I'm actually working to break down a lot of the siloing that separates us. So even within a particular career, I imagine within the tech industry, there's a lot of siloing. There is a lot of siloing in the art world. I mean, dance, music, writing, visual art. They're totally siloed from each other very much. And then just, you know, if you printmakers, there's like a printmaker studio here, there's a glass making studio there, there's, you know, so people don't think, gee, we can cross boundaries. And what I'm finding is that the capitalistic world that we live in doesn't want you to cross boundaries because it doesn't fit into their program, you know. So for me, the challenge of blurring the boundaries is how to do that and make any money doing it, because we have to reprogram people's way of thinking about the world that we live in, right? That's the biggest challenge. I think we're really in the middle of a paradigm shift.
Have you had any successes in that, Charly?
Making money?
Well, in the paradigm shift and reprogramming people and maybe making money.
You know, what I found in all of my like talking with people, people are really excited. But when they get really excited is when they realize that it is that it's an invitation to work together to form the place that we live in. That life itself is a work of art, right? And what is our individual role in it as a collective? So
Lindy,
I think that concept is itself a blurring of boundaries, right?
Yeah. Lindy, I saw you
I'm
nodding.
sorry,
I think there's a little lag. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no, I like, I'm right there with you. I especially at the part where, you know, you have to convince people of what it is you're doing. I feel like that's so much of what I do. Like my job does not exist, and I struggle to define what it is I do. Like I would say even like my partner is not totally sure what I do. But it's because it's just like, it's so, I know so well what it is, and I know so well when I'm needed, but it is so rare that I see a job posting for me.
Right.
And I think a lot of that is yeah, it's just like building your own, building your own concepts of what it is to have your job.
It's interesting because
and
sorry, go ahead, Charly.
Oh, I was going to say, and then the challenge is if you're not, you know, if there's not a paying gig for what you're doing, then you have to do these other things. You know, like I photograph houses in order to pay for it. You know, those kinds of things, and then you don't really get to spend the time that the work really deserves.
Yeah. We've all got to figure out our way to be our own patron.
Yeah, and I feel like that's interesting too. It's sort of like what I find myself. It's getting a little bit easier as I progress throughout my career to find things that are less that like, you know, find the things that make the money that are less in contrast with the things I do, because I care about them. So when I was first doing it, I was like, you know, like doing these like development gigs where I was like, oh, I'm not sure how good I feel about this. But then like as your personal gigs, I would say, get closer to your professional gigs and you sort of step your game up, you're able to sort of find, or you get sort of the credibility that people start believing you when you tell them that they need you. And you can start building towards like those things meshing a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's amazing the discomfort that comes with not having a professional label, but rather like an identity, but rather an affinity. It is easy when you can just look at a job posting and be like, I'm a stockbroker. I'm just going to look for stockbroker jobs.
Totally.
There's definitely some comfort in knowing what box you fit into, if not a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's where it becomes complicated, I feel like.
Yep. So Lindy,
that's when you create your own box.
Yeah.
You laser cut your own.
Totally.
So Claire just said, Claire, do you want to just say that? Background noise is okay.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I think like what this makes me think of is I'm reading a book right now called Life 3.0. It's by Max Tegmark, who's a MIT physicist and mathematician, and it's kind of about the AI revolution and how we've been the last like 30 years been moving from this place of mastery and woodworking and metalsmithing and manual labor, and like there's value in human capital or human like strength rather, into a space where AI is rapidly catching up with the things that we do. And what I'm hearing is a tendency towards, in this group is a tendency towards creativity in like in money making, but also in like kind of a forward thinking paradigm of like how are we making change in the world, and how are we using the things that we do to create the world we want to live in. And so that's something I find really fascinating. That's what I have to say. I was trying to type that and it just couldn't type fast.
Yeah, totally. I think it's really interesting on like making those, you know, social changes and like finding how that fits in with the world, which is like with jobs, with those ideas and with all the new technological advancements is like a really interesting intersection and super difficult.
Yeah, and I think that there's a space of like, yes, we don't know what we're doing because we're making it up. Because because we're, I mean, I wouldn't want to say that I'm at the vanguard of anything, but maybe we are at the vanguard. We're at the forefront of figuring out what's next in technology, what's next at the intersection of art and science. And the world doesn't have a label for us, and that inherently makes it uncomfortable, but it's a really good place to be in. That uncomfortableness, it means that we're not part of the crowd.
It's interesting when you think about how many kids are coming up in school right now, and whatever they're going to wind up doing doesn't even like remotely exist right now. So I'm curious, and this is an open question for anybody who wants to answer. In my fantasy, somebody has caught this video. They're sitting there thinking like, I didn't know there were more me's out there. Like Claire said, like, I feel like I'm just making it up all the time. I can't find a mentor who I can like apprentice with to learn how to do this. What would you guys say to that imaginary viewer?
Oh, I would say like find what you care. Like, I don't know, like I would say it takes time. It takes time to like to think about the thing that can bring you a job and money. And like I would say to be patient with that, but also like, you know, kind of keep it in mind with knowing that you have to take steps and like knowing that it will take time, but it's certainly possible. And yeah, that there's many small things that will help you get there.
I'd like to add that you don't necessarily need to do it in one step either.
Mm-hmm.
You can start on a path and change your direction as you go and kind of refine what you're interested in. Because it's like I started off looking for a degree in education, ended up working for the university doing web development because it kind of appeared out of magic, 20 years ago. It's like, boom. And it's like, whoa, this is the next new thing. And so it took me off a whole different direction.
That's awesome.
So did you say that there are other yous out there, or there are not?
Well, I imagine there are a lot of people out there. I mean, I know because I work with clients, and a lot of them have this feeling that they're alone, that nobody thinks about the world the same way that they do. So I'm hoping that somebody's watching this video and thinking like, wait, all these guys are making it up too? So maybe they're discovering that, maybe they're watching this video, or maybe they have like an inkling that like there's more people out there who see the world the way they do. What would you say to them, Charly?
Well, I actually think that there are a lot of people out there who are seeing the world in a somewhat similar way, but we're not necessarily in the same place at the same time.
Unless someone organizes
maybe they're at the same time, but they're not in the same place. And I think that I think it's important that we're doing what we do in the place that we are. And that we're all actually helping each other, doing it in the place that we are, and we don't even know that we're helping each other do it. But by doing it, we're advancing the other. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, again, this is for anybody. Sorry, go ahead, Charly.
I found that, out there, they're talking to some random person that you met on a train or something, and you're like, oh my God, you're doing, like, we totally get each other, and we just happen to be traveling together, and our paths, and sometimes it's not where we are, but the people are there. I think for one thing, we need to talk to strangers more, because it's amazing what we actually have in common with each other, but we don't even bother to converse, so we don't know. But yeah, I think it's super important that we do what we do.
Yeah, and to kind of like add to that on like a practical note, I would say, like, if someone is looking to have like this non-traditional career trajectory in this, like, whatever sphere that it takes, if you don't want your job to look like other people's job, then maybe this is totally wrong, and maybe this is more Michelle's bag, but then I would say stop looking where everyone else is looking for their career. So like, if you're sitting on like monster.ca or whatever, and you're looking for these jobs, and you're like, none of these jobs are for me. It's like, well, probably, because that's not where you're going to find the thing that you need to find. So, like, look up the arts organizations that are local to you, and like be genuinely involved in those communities, and like, yeah, talk to strangers, talk to people who are in the same spaces as you, and like, you'll build up the things. But like, if you're sitting there looking at like traditional job boards and you're like, well, I don't want a traditional job, then of course it's going to seem difficult, and like, everyone is not like you.
Yeah, I think you're right on. And like, I'll do a very short soapbox. Informational interviews. They answer what Charly was saying, talk to strangers, and they answer what Lindy was saying too. If you're not, like, job postings is like the most demoralizing way to look for work in the world. So if you're not digging it, give yourself permission to quit and get out there and talk to people. Anyone will have coffee with you. Send like a nice little kind of sucky uppy email about how much you love their work and want to pick their brains, and they'll go have coffee with you. Claire, did you want to say something?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to agree with you. I think like, if I could choose one thing that has made a difference in my life is finding cool people. To find cool people who are doing cool stuff and reach out to them and be like, hey, I want to, like, how are you doing this? And people love talking about themselves.
It's true.
That is so true.
Really true. We love, like, just someone expressing interest in our work or in other people's work is like so rad. And everyone I think almost everyone I've ever reached out to has been like, hell yeah, let's have coffee, or like, I'll answer your questions, or like whatever you need. And just find cool people doing cool stuff and like run after it as hard as you can.
Yeah. And so I have one client.
Yeah, like I have like a literal list.
Go ahead, Lindy.
So do I. I totally do.
Yeah.
Yeah, a literal list of like people I think are cool, and I'll like just email them like once a week. I'll email someone off that list and be like, we should have coffee, and then like I literally just keep track of it, because it's totally what you're saying, Claire. It's just like, talk to them.
Yeah, talk to them, because if you don't talk to them, then you're never gonna talk. There's no like reason for you guys to ever be in the same universe together, I also have a list at the company I joined like in the past couple of months. I like, one of my first days, I was like, guys, do we have a dream list? And they're like, what's that? And I was like, dream list, like, give me your top 10 people, like, companies you want to work for, and I'm gonna reach out. Like, that's like, I don't see another way to do it. I don't know.
Totally.
So
That's a
I
great
have one
idea.
client who is an absolute introvert, and every time we talk about this kind of stuff, she's like, that's all well and good, Michelle, but like, I'm not doing that. So if you're sitting at home and you're an introvert, there are workarounds. You can go with a friend. You can go to a talk that one of these people that you admire is.
You can call us and we will email them for you.
Yeah.
There are lots of workarounds. There's lots of ways to make you feel safe and still push yourself out of your comfort zone enough that you're connecting to that community that you want to connect to.
But I would also like to add to that, like, I used to be so shy, and I really pushed myself. Like, it really helps if it's someone you're actually really excited about, because then you have a bunch of things you want to ask them. And then like, it very genuinely gets easier the more you do it, because you just learn the things to do.
And literally the only thing that can go poorly is if they say no. And that's not even like, then you're back at where you started. You've lost nothing.
Yeah. And like, to be fair, like, don't start with Oprah or like, you know.
Why not?
You could start with Oprah, but if Oprah shoots you down, maybe like, don't give up. So
if you started at the top, then
does
it's
anybody have any
easy.
closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think I have one more closing thought. I wanted to mention this in the previous question is, and we alluded to it like way earlier in the conversation of that purposeful reflection. The thing that I think in the last like couple years, especially like Michelle, when you met me, that has been really helpful in my life is that purposeful reflection. If it's monthly, whether it's weekly, like especially weekly, even on a Sunday, just to sit down with a cup of coffee and like have the same set of questions every week and be like, okay, what did I do well? What can I work on? Who do I want to call? Who can help me with what I need to get done? That has been a game changer, just like actually life changing, to be deliberate and to like really force yourself into a space of reflection. Sometimes it's forcing, sometimes it's more peaceful, but giving that gift to yourself and giving that gift to myself has been a huge help in my life.
That's a great takeaway. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel really great to got a chance to speak to you folks. Y'all seem really like you're doing some really cool stuff. It's really exciting.
Yes, I'm so glad you guys all met, and I'll circulate your emails to each other if anybody wants to get in touch.
Yay!
Yeah.
And if
Thank
anybody
you.
in the greater world wants to learn more about Lindy, you can find her on her website, lindywilkins.com, and I will spell that I'm not going to spell it out loud. That always goes badly. The video will be posted on YouTube and also on my website, which is michellekrasny.com, which I'm also not going to spell. Lindy, is there anything going on right now that you'd love to plug or publicize?
Ooh.
I mean, if you had to pick one of your many, many hats.
I don't know. Off the top of my head, there's just too many random things.
Okay.
If anyone's listening from Toronto, you should just send me an email.
Sure, she'll answer.
Go for a low pressure coffee.
It's true. I hadn't seen her since I took my class with her, and I sent her an email, and she went out for coffee with me. So, and that brought us here. So thank you everyone for making the time, for trying the new format. I feel like this was really fun. Thank you especially to Lindy for letting me put you in the hot seat. And I hope to see you guys all again really soon and get to chat with each of you. I mean, Dan, I'll see you soon, but Charly and Claire, I'd love to catch up too.
Totally,
Thanks,
this
Michelle.
is great. Thanks for organizing, Michelle.
This was so
great.
fun. Yeah.
Everyone, go to michellekrasny.com and book.